On the 25th of September 2015, all United Nations member states signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, a set of solutions for the biggest problems the world faces. It's where we must take urgent action, starting with climate and our planet.
A satellite image from NASA as
que alcanzaron hasta 2,5 metros en la capital.
Rising death toll and massive evacuation in Indonesia as water storm greater Jakarta following the heaviest downpour in more than 2 decades.
Worst plague of locusts to affect the region.
The damage to pastures and crops could create, quote, severe consequences for the region where nearly 12 million people are coping. It could be the worst the area has seen in 20 years.
This is a double whammy. You know, we're dealing with the cyclone and with the exposure to COVID.
Well, the fires raging in Northern California have now become some of the largest in state history. More than 12,000 firefighters are currently battling the blazes that have...
San Francisco Bay Area smothered by some of the worst air quality on the planet.
Valley reaches an all-time high of 100.
Delhi on Tuesday recorded the hottest day,
spiking above 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's a myth that each and every one of us doesn't have the ability to change the world dramatically and quickly. There have been enormous shifts in power and behavior to the benefit of all humanity, and it can happen again.
Nelson Mandela said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." These are some of the things that must be done.
They really believe this is the answer. They don't have a faith in God, but they do have a faith in man. And so they believe that man can actually reach that objective that they've never been able to reach of creating a utopia where there's no poverty, there's no hunger, there's no unfairness, there's justice for all, and there's basically an average standard of living that all of us are part of. Now, I have to admit that many of the people who are pushing for this the hardest themselves are some of the wealthiest men on the planet. And what lies at the heart of these kind of basically statements, generalized as they are, is that when the details are finally flushed out, we find out that sometimes they're far different than what we anticipated.
We all watched with amazement when exactly 1 year ago, young people from all over the world took to the streets to express their feeling that we're not doing enough about climate change.
Today we take a stand for Mother Nature.
That we're not treating it like the emergency it is. It's a year later now. Have we done enough? No, we have not. And climate change is only part of this story. Our rainforests are disappearing at an extraordinary rate. 1 football field of rainforest is destroyed every 6 seconds. 1 million plant and animal species are on the brink of extinction. By 2050, there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And so climate change and our treatment of the natural world are colliding and exacerbating each other to create a perfect storm. This cannot go on. You know it. I know it, and we know what we need to do. We need to reduce global emissions by 50% by 2030. To do this, we need a rapid but just transition to renewable energy. That means an end to the building of new coal power stations and an end to subsidizing of fossil fuels. Government should also shift the tax burden from payrolls to carbon. Taxing carbon rather than people will increase output and employment while reducing emissions. And we need to stop deforestation in its tracks, planting trees instead of chopping them down. We need to think about what we eat and how we produce food, embracing healthy, nutritious diets, sustainable farming methods, and reducing food waste.
And again, most people have no idea what Agenda 21 is, but Agenda 21 basically called for, and I quote, a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. We heard President Bush say this is going to be a different kind of government. This is going to be, here we read in their statement, it's going to be different than anything the world has ever known. And immediately I think about Daniel chapter 7, where he says of that last world empire, it is different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. It goes on to say there needs to be a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. Now, if you begin to think about this, and particularly I'd say, again, the devil is in the detail as you read these 350 pages that follow after these opening preambles. But the bottom line is a change in the priorities of government. Your government should no longer be concerned with the needs of its citizens, but rather the citizens of the world. That becomes the greater priority. That also there needs to be a redeployment of all human resources, both corporate and individual, as well as financial resources.
Whatever it is, coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We could choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas. Or we can walk through it lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it.
The one world government has always been the ultimate goal of the United Nations from its very inception, as was expressed by the first director of the UN's World Health Organization, a gentleman by the name of Brock Chisholm, who was famous within the medical and psychiatric world. He made the statement very clearly. He said, to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family and traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. Interesting. He goes on to describe those religious dogmas as he said, the only psychological force capable of producing these perversions, to create these perversions of loyalty and family and patriotism and religion, these perversions, the only thing that can create those things is morality. The concept of right and wrong. The eradication of the concept of right and wrong is the objective. Now, you wonder why we have moved into an era where increasingly people say there is no right or wrong, there is no good or evil, there's no truth or falsehood. There are no absolutes, and there is no absolute God to enforce absolute morality. If you think it's right, then it's right for you. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from a lot of different strains, but it's been heavily promoted within academic institutions, within schools, within our children, to create this idea that we can release and let go of the kind of things that usually bind people together, particularly a love for your own country and a patriotic nationalism.